Game over, man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for August 5th, 2025, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. I am very sorry, baby, that I cried on a podcast last week. I didn't really acknowledge that on the main show.
You're sorry about that? No, you're not.
We recorded an episode last week, and I embarrassed myself.
No, you didn't.
It was actually a really great moment. You and Megan were very gracious. I am deeply grateful for
I
it.
would never interrupt a hashtag JD Tears moment. What kind of person do you think I am?
It was lovely, unexpected in some ways because we were talking about Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
But at the same time, not at all surprising. It was really funny. I sent out a text to our awards editor, Shadon Larkey, earlier today. And we were talking about some things, and she was gone for a lot of the summer, so we were talking about summer catch-up stuff. And she mentioned Fantastic Four, and she wasn't the biggest fan of it, and that's when I told her that I cried on the podcast last week, and her response was, "What? You?
Oh, brother.
Getting emotional, conveying the anxieties of fatherhood," is what she said. Color me shocked. Well, what are you gonna do? I can't help myself.
We're just going to laugh it off and just be like, that's a Tuesday for us.
It is a Tuesday. I'm turning 40 this week.
You are
and I have
very
the right to be emotional about it.
You are very emotional. I mean, for those listening, I can't tell you how many times JD has apologized to me for whatever reason by telling me, "Sorry, baby."
Sorry, baby. Yeah, that's usually how I start off every sentence when I'm reaching out to Brendan.
"Oh, Brendan, sorry, baby. I forgot about this." Or, "Oh, we got to do this."
Yeah, exactly. I am really looking forward to getting into this, all jokes aside. This is a film, sorry, baby, that premiered at Sundance earlier in the year, where it received widespread critical acclaim.
Yeah.
Many talking about how it was the best film to come out of Sundance this year. It was subsequently picked up by A24 and then released in theaters in a limited capacity at the end of June, I believe. And it has slowly been expanding more and more and more. And then this week, it is out on digital.
Yeah, as of today, as we're recording this.
Yeah. Yes. And I just got the movie. I'm in the Miami market, Fort Lauderdale market. We got it in theaters like 2 weeks ago. It's fairly fresh here.
It was about a week ago for me here in the Philly market, but I think the first theater it came into was somewhere in New Jersey, of all places, and then made its way to one of my local independent theaters just a few miles away. Slowly trickling out, but weirdly, by the time I'm able to actually see it in a theater, lo and behold, I can watch it at home.
Yeah. It does say here, despite the limited release at the end of June, the nationwide release was on July 25th. So
that makes sense. Okay.
It did go wider, quote unquote, wider.
As wide
July
as a
25th.
film like this ever could.
Exactly. Exactly. As wide as a movie like this will go.
A24's smaller films, what their definition of wide actually is.
Exactly. And who doesn't love an A24 film with Lucas Hedges? That's just
right.
part of the formula. You get at least one of those a year.
I think that's baked into his contract. It's been a while since we've seen him, hasn't it?
It has been a little bit, yeah.
I mean, what was the last prominent thing that we saw him in? I know he was in a film last year that went straight to Netflix. I think that film with Regina King, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was called Shirley. But I feel like the last thing we really saw him in that he was prominently featured in was probably Steven Soderbergh's Let Them All Talk.
Let Them All Talk, yeah.
Yeah, that was 5 years ago.
5 years ago. Did he take a break? He took a break after his run in the 2010s.
Maybe. I don't know the circumstances of that. Maybe I'm a bit behind the scenes a little too much as to why he may have taken that break, but I'm not really sure.
Here, I'm just going to, before we get started, I'm going to go through this run here.
Okay.
2012, he's in Moonrise Kingdom. Then in 2013, he's in The Zero Theorem, the Terry Gilliam film, and Labor Day. The Grand Budapest Hotel, he has a little role in. Then in 2016, this small little feature called Manchester by the Sea, where most people probably became familiar with him. Then Lady Bird the following year, as well as 3 Billboards. Then Boy Erased and Ben is Back, and mid-90s in 2018. Then Honey Boy and Waves in 2019. French Exit. Let's not forget that, Jim. And Let Them All Talk in 2020. That was
that's a
decent run where he was kind of all over the place.
That's a wild career. And you're right, a lot of A24 films.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of indie gems, awards, players in some ways.
Yeah.
And then he just takes a 5-year break.
Yeah, I was looking this up as you were talking, but if we were to take AI's overview on Google at face value, he did take a break from acting starting around 2019 to 2020 to focus on other aspects of life, such as writing and spending time with family, which
there you go.
Good for him. Good for him. After a run like that, I think you've deserved all of the pause that you needed.
Yeah. So he's back with Sorry Baby. I love that he comes back and he's like, you know what? What is A24 up to now?
Like, it's still baked in my contract. I got to find another A24 film. Otherwise, they're going to release me.
Exactly. Even though when they filmed this, A24 had not picked up the film, picked it up yet for release. I don't believe that is the case, right?
Because I think they only picked it up because he's in it.
It
so
may
they had
be,
to.
Right?
They had to.
That could have been part of it. Wait, this movie's at Sundance and it stars who? Lucas Hedges is in it?
Get our scout out there. Okay, we got money. Throw money at it.
Throw money at it.
I like how we're here
Absolutely.
talking about Lucas Hedges when we really should be talking about Eva Victor.
I know, as if he has a huge role here, and he does not. He has a small role here. This is the Eva Victor show. She writes, directs, and stars in Sorry Baby, which is why I wanted to have a little fun getting the Lucas Hedges of it all out of the way early, because the rest of this conversation will primarily be talking about her and what she does here as a writer, director, and star. So with all of that laid out, are we ready to get into Sorry Baby?
Are you ready to cry, JD?
We'll see.
Are you ready to say, Brennan, I'm sorry, baby, once again?
Perhaps. I think that might be the case. It is, as we just noted, written and directed by Eva Victor, and this is a directorial debut. It stars Eva Victor, as well as Naomi Ackie, Lucas Hedges, John Carroll Lynch, and others that come and go throughout the film. If you're not familiar with Sorry Baby, something bad happened to Agnes. Agnes being our central character here, played by Eva Victor. But life goes on for everyone around her, at the least. Okay. That's it. That's all it says here.
You weren't kidding when you said offline. That plot synopsis was kind of genius.
Yeah. Pretty simple, to the point.
Well,
they nailed it.
This
Concise.
movie is pretty simple and to the point, and sometimes all the better for it.
All right. Well, with all of that said, Brendan, what did you think about Sorry Baby?
I am just coming off the heels of watching this, so I'm still very fresh on it.
Literally, he just got done watching this moments ago.
The only time I had to see it this weekend was literally hours before we're recording this particular review for it. So here I am, very fresh on it. But sometimes when I'm very fresh on a movie, I feel like that makes for the better conversations. At least it does for me, because I don't have to overthink it. I just kind of roll with my feelings on the film as they are, especially in the moment and how current that it is. I did really like this film quite a bit. And I think I liked it so much because it does two things very right. One of them being something that's sort of alluded to in its plot synopsis, where that plot synopsis literally opens up with something bad happened to Agnes. And we've seen many movies, dramas, comedies, dramedies. This is very much functioning as a dramedy, which I'll also talk about. But we've seen many movies that involve some type of traumatic or horrific act on our main protagonist. And a lot of times the movie will spend time being very coy with what that thing is, as if they're treating it as some type of big reveal or some type of surprise. And I usually don't like when movies do that because I feel like it's sort of cheapening the realism of what that thing could be by basically turning it into a movie device. Sorry Baby is a movie that kind of does that, but also doesn't do that at all, which I thought was a really interesting balance. The movie is told it's not reverse chronological order, but it's out of order in a way, right? It basically starts kind of at the end, but not really at the end. It kind of has a weird Tarantino-like structure in a way.
Yep.
But that first act is very deliberately cryptic as to what that bad thing is that happened to Agnes. But there are enough clues throughout the movie, even before that thing happens, that you kind of know what that thing is. And I do like how it doesn't try to play with suspense. It actually does trust the audience to play along with the way that the drama is unfolding and the way that these characters actually interact with one another. I like the obviousness of that. It's as if you are a part of this group of grad students and where their lives are now, and you are not just observing, you're actually partaking in their conversations. And I think it handles that drama very well. And the other thing I like too about this movie is how it functions as a dramedy. Many independent films that function as a dramedy tend to have very obvious comedic cues and then very obvious dramatic cues. And a lot of times they do work together, but they often feel like the movie sometimes has to switch tones in order to qualify as a dramedy. It'll sometimes have its very clear comedic bits and then sometimes it's very dramatic bits. But Sorry Baby is a very effortless fusion between the two of them. At least it was for me. Some of the moments here that I laughed the loudest are also some of the most horrific parts of the movie simultaneously. There's a moment midway through that I won't give away where I'll simply say Agnes is confronted by a group of, I guess they're guidance counselors for the university post-traumatic event that happens. The way that scene crystallizes is both incredibly saddening, but also kind of hilarious. And I think that scene in general is sort of the summation as to why I think this movie works tonally. And I think Eva Victor, as a filmmaker, especially as a director, I think gets those tones very well. The balance is so on point. And I think the way it functions as a movie, as a dramedy, and the way it plays with suspense in a way that's not cheap, those are the things that I love the most about it, on top of what I'm sure we'll talk about with regard to its thematic notions on opening up to the bad stuff in your life and what that means. So I do think it's a very effective movie.
Yeah, I quite loved this film as well. It is an incredible debut and honestly one of the best films of the year to this point. There is certainly a lot to discuss narratively and thematically with this film, but maybe most impressively, and you were just talking about it there, Brendan, is Eva Victor's tonal precision. The way this film shifts from hilarity to heartbreak to despondency, all within seconds of each other, is stunning. There are countless scenes here that are both deeply poignant and very funny simultaneously. To your point, that is truly, truly remarkable. But because of her equally phenomenal performance, those tonal swings are lived in and seamless to Agnes's experience. She's naturally funny, even if soft-spoken, and she does a really great job of maintaining that even when things take a drastic turn. There's a lot to love about this film, but its ability to balance tone is remarkably calibrated and inspired filmmaking. I also love how Eva is able to create a sense of place without ever being specific about where this story takes place, with the art direction, the cinematography, and even the dialogue of the film denote rural New England in the fall.
Yeah.
And it's wonderfully immersive. It reminded me a lot of The Holdovers in that regard. I really love that about this
That's
film.
a really good comp. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. And of course, we'll talk more about this film and its thematic core as this conversation goes. But I do think this is one of the most unique films about trauma and how one copes with the emotional volatility in the aftermath. There's a line from Agnes in the third act that I found somewhat profound, and it leads to a final scene that subtly gutted me. I do think the hype coming out of Sundance was real for this one. And you never know. Sundance, these movies tend to get some hype. Maybe it's because it's the beginning of the year. People are ready to turn that page. I don't know. Sometimes the hype isn't warranted, but it very, very much was for this one. I really do think it's one of the best of the year to this point.
Yeah, our editor-in-chief over at In Session Film, Dave Giannini, I think he actually cites this as maybe his favorite film of the year so far, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't he write the review for at InSessionFilm.com?
I'd have to go double check, but that sounds right.
I'm pretty sure he did. I remember he talked quite a bit about, and he may have tweeted this rather than write this in his review. I have to double check this, but he did cite that sometimes movies are just here to make you feel something. And I think that's a really great way to describe how and why Sorry Baby is a very effective film. It's not necessarily one of those independent movies where a thesis could be written on as far as what its artful and thematic complexities are, even though this is a very complex film. But it is ultimately that subtlety and that simplicity that's meant to garner a feeling from you. And I think that's why it works so well, and why what you're talking about there as far as the film's subtlety and how it's designed to make you feel this certain relationship with Agnes. It's because of that subtlety. There's a delicacy to this movie that I feel like many other movies like it, many of its counterparts, don't always succeed in, because they either have to overplay the drama or overplay the comedy or overplay the thematic bite of it. And this is a movie that's very deliberately, I don't want to say underplaying it, but really smoothing things out a bit, which is why it does feel so seamless. And it is a movie that's designed to make you feel something. And I did as well. Like I really did feel something, but I love the simplicity of it because it's meant to evoke the feelings that everyone feels in some way, regardless of what that specific subject matter is.
Absolutely. And to be clear on this, to bring some clarity, Ronald Mayer wrote the review out of Sundance for Sorry Baby.
Thank you for correcting me on that.
And there's also an op-ed from Cody Allen as well. So we have a couple of pieces on Sorry Baby there.
Wow, we already have two pieces on it.
Yeah. But to your point, I do agree with you. There's a lot about how this film makes you feel that I do find quite tantalizing. And I think what moved me the most about the film is how Agnes is affected by time. Even after years pass from this event that she experiences, she still recoils from her trauma, as we see in the scene where she's called into jury duty. And when she's asked to tell the prosecutor what happened to her, she pauses and tells the prosecutor that she's never said it out loud before. And that causes a reaction out of her there in the moment. It's even more visceral in the scene where she has a panic attack after finding out that her attacker had sex with a fellow student. Even though time has passed at this point, she's still very much grappling with what happened to her, as is expected. But what's insightful is that it's not something that's drowning her anymore. She has this incredible conversation with a character named Pete, a sandwich shop owner, who helps her calm down from her panic attack.
Oh, John Carroll Lynch, the man, the legend.
Incredible moment. And she tells him in this conversation, I feel guilty when I don't think about it, which I think is the line of the movie. It's fascinating how Agnes has been able to somewhat move on from what happened enough that she isn't thinking about her trauma all the time. But the fact that she can live in some semblance of normalcy, it's bothersome, perhaps because the trauma had been the thing that defined her the most since it happened, or perhaps because healing would leave that Agnes behind, and she doesn't want to do that. Either way, it denotes that healing is complex, it's uncertain, it brings its own set of paradoxes, and I found that overlaid into the film's drama and humor to be so incredibly fascinating. And then it leads to this final scene that I noted in my opening thoughts that slayed me. It's not something that I necessarily foresaw coming, but it is devastating to hear this. I guess you could call it a conversation. It's mostly a monologue where
no, but
Agnes is having,
there's an audience of a sort.
There is an audience of a sort.
Yeah.
And as she's talking to, I guess I can reveal this because I'm not giving any context away. She's having a conversation with a baby, a rather new baby, a few months old baby.
Yeah.
And as she's having this dialogue, she's talking about the likelihood of bad things happening to this child as she gets older. And there's something about the visual of the moment and the innocence of childhood, something that provoked literal tears on this show last week as I talked about that. But there's something about that visual in this film that amplifies the poignancy of what Agnes is saying there. And it sneaks up on you. This isn't a film that is calling for overt emotion, but I think the paradox of this film and how that moves Agnes, how time has affected her to the point where she's been able to move on and she feels guilty for that, and how that leads to what she says to this baby at the end. It is incredibly heartbreaking, but truthful and hopeful at the same time. And that dichotomy in that moment it's really, really great.
I mean, it's no wonder that our editor-in-chief, Dave Giannini, likes this so much, because this movie basically is a therapy session in many ways. It is, I say that facetiously, but I also don't. And what's most revealing about not just this film, but the way people compartmentalize this sort of trauma and how they feel about that, it's when they can get to that point about opening up and speaking to it when they're no longer... Well, when they're affected by it in a different way, I'll simply say. And I think that speaks volumes to what you're talking about, how Agnes at one point even reveals that she feels guilt when she's not thinking about it anymore. And there is a moment where I think a lot of people can relate to that very notion, because to your point, it is a part of you. And shedding that skin is like leaving that part of you behind as if it's a bad thing. Because sometimes, depending on when you experience something like that in your life, especially if you're quite young, as Agnes was, that becomes sort of a formative moment for you. That becomes kind of, you feel like that becomes part of your DNA. And that ending with this baby is sort of an acknowledgement that I really can't shed this away fully, but how can I use that to fuel my growth going forward? I think that's why the symbolic gesture of actually plastering her thesis over the window, as obvious as that is, has a lot of power, because it means, yes, I can't hide from this, but when can I actually utilize this to my advantage? And this movie does deliver on that point. It does eventually get to that point. And we're talking a lot about Eva Victor's direction and how they're able to navigate, this story to arrive to those points. But this performance is also doing that work too. It's a great performance too. It's a very subtle performance, and we love those internalized performances, and this is definitely one of them.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of performances, one of my favorite scenes of the film performatively, but this also ties into what we've been talking about regarding this idea of coping with trauma even after years pass, feeling guilty for it. And I mentioned this earlier, that scene that she has with the Pete character, once again played by the great John Carroll Lynch.
Yeah.
And one fascinating aspect to that moment, and I don't know if this was top of mind for the film or not, but I think it wonderfully taps into this idea of how one interaction can have this profound impact on a person. We don't know if Agnes will ever meet up with Pete again, although one can imagine that because of his niceness and how good his sandwiches are, that she will be back to the shop.
It made me hungry. I wanted a sandwich afterwards, I'll tell you that.
I know, but we don't know. Maybe this one interaction is all they will ever have together. And it's compelling how therapeutic it becomes for Agnes. Pete's actions were exactly what she needed in that moment for someone to, one, help her calm down from her panic attack, but secondly, just listen to her and be with her in the moment. And it doesn't hurt that he gave her free food as well that she loved, which is the perfect recipe, perhaps pun intended, for I feel guilty when I don't think about it. An epiphany that she may not have thought about before.
Right.
Or at the very least, it gave her an excuse to say it out loud and to truly wrestle with that conflict. There's something about peace. There's something about Pete and his calmness and his niceness that allowed Agnes to feel comfortable to have that moment.
Yeah. And not just his niceness, sorry to cut you off, but also the fact that he was an objective observer. You know, he didn't have that relatability to this group and how they were all essentially affected by what had happened in very different ways, mind you. But he didn't have that specificity, which allowed him to listen differently, which is what she needed.
I agree. Which again goes back to the central ethos of this thematic idea that one interaction and all of the pieces that come together to make that happen, it has this profound impact. And how all of those roads merge together there, I think is incredible. And you couple that with, to your point a moment ago, the performances of Lynch and Victor in that moment. And it's incredible. And again, I think that's why the emotion of the film works so well, because that's not a scene that is necessarily cultivating overt emotion, but the film uses that epiphany in a way that is insightful for Agnes in the moment, and then uses it later for a catharsis as she talks to little baby Jane, which it's incredible. I love how those thematic ideas are working concurrently with each other.
I feel like the one moment in the film where it could have gotten a little bit too schmaltzy in how it handled that emotion is this cat that Agnes inadvertently adopts.
But it's a cat. It's an adorable.
Oh, it's adorable.
Cat.
It's absolutely adorable. And again, this goes back to my earlier point in how this film treats its subject matter and how it doesn't try to cheapen it with easy tricks or anything like that, or try to heighten the drama in very movie-like ways. Because in any other movie, if this were made by any other filmmaker that wasn't nearly as delicate as Eva Victor is, that cat would have been an absolute obvious tool to bring this character some type of closure or some type of epiphany, right? But the cat's kind of here as a little bit of a joke for most of it. It's a way for Agnes to find a little bit of peace and to think of something or someone else other than herself in this moment. So I think there is a obvious thematic idea there, but for the most part, this cat is just an adorable little creature that helps keep her company and then maybe kills a mouse. Like, that's kind of the arc of the cat, is that it kills a mouse. Like, that's more or less what it does. But it's maybe the one moment where this movie could have fallen into some type of trap, but there's still yet another delicacy to that, which I appreciated.
I agree. Like, I think the film handles it well because, one, she has this endearing moment as she picks up the cat off the street, and then she goes to the store to get it food, and she's trying to hide the cat in her jacket as if we and even other characters in the scene, they can't see or hear the cat. And so it's this funny little moment that is somewhat reminiscent of the silliness of Inside Llewyn Davis.
Yeah, actually, the thing that made me laugh the most about that scene was how she was trying to decide which type of cat food to get, whether the salmon or the tuna, and she's having the cat smell the can, and she even openly acknowledges, "You're just smelling the tin can, aren't you?"
Yeah. So it's a funny little moment, and even as it relates to her coping, it's somewhat fleeting, right? Because the cat doesn't become this prominent tool throughout the rest of the film. It mostly is in the background or gone altogether until you get to the mouse sequence. And then by that point in the film, the cat comes in for a very different reason.
Yeah.
So I think it handles all of that quite well. This is the film that wonderfully avoids over schmaltz and over sentimentality. There's really not much sentimentality to this film. There's certainly a heartbreak and a devastation that Agnes experiences, but the way it treats that subject matter, especially with this tonal swinging back and forth as we've been talking about, it's calibrated in a very diligent way that treats it seriously, has these wonderful insights without overcooking it to the point where it's this overdone awardsy kind of thing.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think all the performances handle that very well. And it's not just with its drama, like I feel like we're spending most of our time talking about. It's the film's comedy is very effortlessly infused with all of that too, not just from Eva Victor and that performance that we acknowledged earlier, but really every performance here, I think, understands that middle ground between how this functions as a dramedy, the comedic bits and the dramatic bits. Maybe Kelly McCormick is the only one that veers too far into the comedic territory, but I think that's maybe more what she's asked to do and not necessarily the performance, because those comedic bits and how her jealousy is basically played up as such an obvious joke. Those scenes are designed to be a little bit more, I guess, for lack of a better term, goofy, a little slapsticky in how it treats her. So she certainly sells that. It's just those scenes might seem a little bit jarring when compared to how smooth and effortless the rest of the movie is. But at the same time, I will give Kelly McCormick a little bit of credit for really not overselling that comedy too much. I feel like that's a performance that could have easily gone way too far with it. And I think it's restrained enough, but also still distracting enough that it kind of sits in this middle ground where I'm still a little unsure about it, but it's certainly not the worst thing that it could have been.
Yeah, I do wonder about this. So you're speaking to something that I have been wrestling the most with this film. Now, I don't necessarily see this as a criticism. If anything, I think I have found more complexity with the film as it relates to certain aspects of how it plays comedy. One example is the Natasha character, as you're talking about. There are two major scenes. There's a dinner scene early on, which is post-traumatic event. And then there's a confrontation between Natasha and Agnes in Agnes's new office as she has become a tenured professor at this university. And that is also post-traumatic event. And you are right. Kelly McCormick is ever so slightly-ish, caricature-ish. A little bit. It's not overblown, but it is jarring comparatively to the rest.
It could have been heightened even more to a very bad degree.
Absolutely. And there are a few other examples. The doctor scene is another one. And you mentioned it earlier, the school officials or counselors that she talks to as well. And you can maybe argue Gavin at the end of the film. Now, here's where I find a little bit of complexity with the way the film handles that in this film. I do wonder if those slight exaggerations are done purposefully, not just for comedic sake, but for thematic sake as well, or emotional
I think they
sake.
are. I think they are. Yeah, because a lot of those examples I think are very much doing that.
Yeah, because how Agnes copes with her trauma, what we see with her, it's almost as if she is separated from the rest of the world. And it led to questions that I had coming out of the screening. Are these examples, these exaggerations, are they representative of people mistreating Agnes, or is it simply an exhibit of how Agnes sees herself as being separated from a world she doesn't recognize anymore? The school
There's something
official
alien
scene,
about that. Yeah.
very alienated. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The doctor scene is perhaps a little bit more obvious. The school officials scene is especially compelling because there's an element of they really can't do anything. He doesn't work there anymore. They can't fire him again. And also, Agnes refused to file a claim against him with the police.
Yeah.
So there's complexity to the moment there that I find really interesting.
Sure.
I think that Agnes is right to feel the way she does.
Yeah.
Because there is, at least the way that it is portrayed to the audience, it's as if these school officials are being a little condescending to her. We can't do anything. And she recoils in the moment. Then there's the moment with Gavin at the end of the film that I also find compelling, where up until that point, Gavin has always been nice and responsive toward her. In one really funny moment, giving her lighter fluid as she's clearly asking it for reasons other than what she's actually asking it for.
Yeah,
But then-
it made me hungry for hot dogs, I'll tell you that.
But then they have a conversation at the end of the film, and again, you see her become alienated with some of the questions that he is asking her. And what he is asking her, it's not intended to be cruel because he doesn't know what happened to her. He has no context. And yet we see her recoil in isolation, maybe a little disappointment, but it felt more like isolation there.
Yeah.
So there are moments of isolation or not isolation, of either comedy or exaggeration that I do wonder if it's purposefully vague, as if is this meant for comedy, or is this really meant more to depict how alienated she now feels?
Yeah, I think it is deliberate for really one reason. And I think it all comes down to one word that I feel like ties a lot of these more obvious comedic bits together. Because many of them, whether it be the doctor's office, whether it be these guidance counselors or whatever their roles are at the university, and then that last scene involving Gavin, it all involves this idea of ignorance, just how ignorant that these characters are to what Agnes's situation is. And a lot of times when you see ignorant people in movies, it's kind of funny, right? And I think this is a movie that's playing with that notion by demonstrating not just their ignorance is kind of a funny thing, but also how isolated that Agnes is in this situation, that she really doesn't have anyone to talk to that's able to relate to what she's going through. And I think maybe that's the glue that's tying some of these things together. I felt that most with the guidance counselor scene, which ends in a line that I thought was both hilarious and heartbreaking at the same time, like I alluded to in my opening thoughts, where they take a pause and one of them literally says to her, "We know what you're going through. We are women."
Yeah.
Like it is a ridiculously stupid and off-putting line. And I think it's deliberately funny, but also deliberately sad, because these women obviously have no idea what she's going through. But they think just because that they are all women, they do. And I think that sense of ignorance is maybe the thing that comedically and dramatically finds that middle ground to tie those scenes together. I feel like that might be the thing.
Well, that's what I find interesting about the complexities of this film, whether they be accidental or intentional. And I think there is absolutely a level of intentionality. But regarding that line of dialogue and how it comes off condescending to Agnes, at least I think that's how us as the audience, we are meant to interpret that. However, the line "we are women," there is a level of, yes, it is played comedically, but also seriously. Again, going back to the tonal precision of the film.
Right.
The other element, though, of the scene, they are women. We don't know anything about their stories. It is very possible that they do understand and empathize with what she's feeling with. Maybe they've also experienced those things. We don't know. We're not told anything about them. But as women in this world, it's very possible they have experienced some level of what Agnes had, which is why I go back to the condescension that the scene portrays is that less of this is what's actually happening, and maybe it's more so a first person perspective of how Agnes feels isolated from the moment. That to me is incredible complexity. Whether
I
again,
agree.
that's accidental or not, I have no idea, but I find that utterly fascinating. Same thing with the doctor sequence, because let's be honest, doctors are often cold and to the point, at least in my experience, that tends to be the case.
Yeah, they're not therapists. They're not there to hear your feelings.
Exactly. The biggest example I can give from my own experience, when Sam was, not even a year old, it was like 8 months. We had to take him to the ER because he had a lung infection. One of his lungs collapsed. We had to go to the ER. It was a very serious situation.
Yeah.
And when I was dealing with the doctors there, they weren't hugging me or showing me empathy. They were very blunt and to the point, arguably cold as to how they were reacting to my child in what I thought was this life-threatening situation. I don't think they were doing that to be rude or to be assholes about it.
No,
but from my perspective, I could absolutely see them as that, given how vulnerable I was in that moment.
Yeah,
and
I think that's a great point.
I kind of wonder if that's what this film is doing as well. It could be a little bit of the doctor being a misogynist a-hole who doesn't really understand. That could be part of what the scene.
It could be both.
Is trying to portray.
It could be all the above.
Yeah, again, I wonder, because that was my experience. The doctors I talked to were cold and borderline ruthless with how they talk to their patients.
Yeah.
But there is a level of bluntness that is needed given those environments. Now, that wasn't an ER situation, so maybe that's not an apples to apples comparison. But my point is to say, when you go into the hospital, I was vulnerable because of the emergency of it all. Agnes is vulnerable because of what she just experienced. So the perspective might be skewed, altered.
Well,
and I think the film is trying to play with that a little bit.
I mean, when you have a movie that is written, directed, and starring the same person, you have to expect that there's going to be some underlying point of view that they're trying to emulate, right?
For sure.
And I think that's very much that is what's happening here. I think that's very much the case as far as how you're describing it, that it is all about perspective and how you perceive your surroundings and how they feel skewed because of the situation that you found yourself in. It is certainly the best way to explain how over the top Kelly McCormick's performance is, because Agnes probably sees Natasha as an annoying person, right?
Exactly. Or how overtly rude the doctor is, or how overtly condescending the school officials are. Like
I think
there is an obviousness to it.
I think that's why I really do like the scene, that final scene between Natasha and Agnes, where Natasha, I'll just simply say, reveals something involving a certain individual that may or may not be tied directly to Agnes's trauma. May be tied to is tied to Agnes's trauma. I'm trying to be coy because I don't want to give spoilers away, but let's just tell it like it is. She reveals something about this person, okay, and which causes Agnes to rightfully break down. The way that she breaks down in that moment, which leads to that panic attack that you alluded to in the car earlier, it's really fascinating because it's almost like her realization that this has all been from my perspective and has been skewing things in a way that I just didn't realize. And there's also this further realization that even though Agnes was the victim in all of this, the perpetrator still didn't really see her as someone special, right? Like just that realization
that's definitely part of it.
But all those things colliding and how it comes back to that idea of perspective, I think is very well handled here.
Yeah. And I think that's what's brilliant about the reveal that comes in the aftermath, because as we noted, that panic attack is what leads to the scene with Pete. And we noted how profound, how insightful that ends up being for Agnes, how beautiful it ends up being for Agnes. Yeah. And I think, again, the lead up, the build up, the narrative, not just tonal, but the narrative precision of this film. I think that's why I go back to, I think it was intentional some of those exaggerated moments, some of those obvious moments, because it gives us clarity as to how isolated, how alienated she now feels in this world. It makes sense of why the doctor is rude, why the school officials are condescending, why Natasha is brazen toward her, and even that, Gavin's ignorance at the end of the film. Like, I love how the film uses that perspective to highlight that alienation. It also simultaneously, those exaggerations are a great juxtaposition to Pete. It, like, the way Pete treats her and his niceness is so
in
juxtaposition.
It's eye-opening that
it is
Pete,
eye-opening,
and even
how
Gavin
different
in
that
a
scene
way,
is.
and even Gavin in a way, like there are good men out there.
Yeah, and the duality of Gavin, like, I think Gavin is a really great character here. He is really nice to her, affable toward her, understanding that she's asking for lighter fluid, but not really for hot dogs, but he plays along with the bit anyway.
Yeah.
Like, he has these intimate encounters with her. There is an affable quality to Gavin. At the same time, there is an obvious ignorance in that final moment when they get into the bathtub and he's asking about their potential future. He doesn't know. He has no context. But again, the film wants to highlight the obviousness of that ignorance. Again, to heighten, maybe not heighten, but to further demonstrate that alienation that Agnes is feeling.
Yeah, and not to suggest that he is in the wrong by asking those things. He just simply doesn't know.
He doesn't
simply
know.
doesn't
How
know.
is he supposed to know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, that's why I go back to the school officials. Yes, they are portrayed as being condescending toward her, and that's how Agnes feels in the moment. She has every right to feel that way. But there is a reality where they can't fire the guy again. They can't do anything, especially when she didn't go to the police in the first place.
Right.
Which is a whole nother element as to why she didn't do that. That's fascinating. So, like, yeah, I love that complexity here.
Yeah.
I think the film is doing some really, really unique things as it relates to trauma, why people react the way they do. And especially with Agnes here not going to the police, and how that is revealed, or why that is revealed.
It's interesting, and I agree. It's interesting and also amazing how a film that is so subtle and, dare I say, simple, those are the ones that allow the most room to be complex, that earn the right to be complex, that leave the room for us to dissect it in a way. Because like I said earlier in this conversation, this is a movie that's not necessarily begging for like a 15-page thesis on what it's doing artfully necessarily, but that's one of its best charms, right? Like, it's dealing with very complex issues, but it's not Lynchian execution, right? How it treats those things. It's a very different way, which I appreciate.
No, but I think its narrative simplicity is what gives it space to be artfully complex.
That's what I'm saying.
I do think there's a lot going on here from a writing perspective, from a directorial perspective, and even performatively. Like, I love how it's this movie about a character dealing with this traumatic event. And what is born out of that is something that is very funny.
Sure.
It is heartbreaking. In the end, arguably hopeful in a way. And again, the way it toys with perspective to offer up some sort of vagueness as to what Agnes may or may not be feeling, how isolated she feels. Like all of that is born out of the film, not overdoing or like letting the story be more than what it is. Like, it's not trying to have, like, there's no like subplot here where the film detours into something that it didn't need to go down.
No,
like, it's very diligent.
It doesn't become a courtroom. it doesn't become a courtroom drama when she has to potentially serve as a juror. It doesn't go down that side tangent like maybe another film could have. Actually, there are a few funny scenes in that courtroom as well, where she openly says in front of the judge, "The law makes no sense, in my opinion." Really funny exchange
which
that
is
they
great.
have there.
It doesn't become a romance movie with Gavin. Like, like it had all these opportunities to do something else, and like it dips its toes into some of these things, but all of that really is a function of it's showing us further those complexities in Agnes's journey.
It is first
and to those epiphanies.
First and foremost, an Agnes movie.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, good movie.
And I found it funny. I found it moving. Great stuff.
Yeah.
Really,
Fun fact.
Really like this film.
Fun fact about this movie. Do you know how Eva Victor prepared for making this?
I do not.
Apparently, they shadowed Jane Schoenbrunn while they were making I Saw the TV Glow.
That's a very different movie.
I agree. I agree.
Which is crazy that's what they shadowed.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that was interesting. IMDb trivia, baby, giving us some facts to live by.
Yeah. I can see why there was a bidding war for this movie. I know Searchlight wanted it, Neon wanted it, Mubi wanted it, and then ultimately it goes to A24. It's a really great movie. It is one of the best of the year. I don't know where it ranks for me. I haven't done that exercise yet, but I do think it's somewhere.
It's up there. It's
in my top 5 or close to it.
It's definitely top 10 for me at this point now. I don't know if it'll stay there by the time we get to the end of the year. But some of the ones I had above it when we did our mid-year report, I still hold very highly. It's certainly not. It's not 28 years later. I mean, that's one of the best of the decade so far. But
fair.
This is definitely one of the better ones of the year.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair. Like I think it's very much in that conversation, that top 5 conversation for me, easily. Again, we'll see where the year goes, but I do really like it a lot. I do want to note we haven't really mentioned Naomi Ackie here. I do think she's really fun, charming. She's not asked to do a ton dramatically, but I do love her dynamic and chemistry with Eva Victor. I think they're really great together on screen. So, really like this a lot. It is out on digital now. I very much recommend this. Great movie.
Sorry, good movie. Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, if you agree or disagree with anything we had to say here, you can leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can always email us in sessionfilm@gmail.com. All right, we have another review coming out this week, The Naked Gun. We will do our best to give that one a conversation. I don't know how you review The Naked Gun, but we are going to talk about it.
Don't spoil it, because that is the basis of our opening thoughts. How do we do this?
Yeah, how do we do this? So we'll figure that out as we go. Episode 648 is available right now as well. We talk about our top 5 spoof movies inspired by The Naked Gun, of course, and that was a really fun conversation. We talk a little bit about the state of cinema. Are we in a new era, given some of the numbers around these blockbuster movies this summer? Maybe. We'll see. We have a really thorough conversation about it, though.
Times they are a-changing.
Times they are a-changing. And in some ways, the times are reverting back to what they were 15 years ago, because we now have to go to the theaters to see trailers. And we are now getting all of this behind the scenes footage of Spider-Man like it's 2012. And I don't know, like I'm having this weird out of body experience I'm like, are we sure it's 2025?
It's a time loop,
right?
It's a time loop.
It's a time loop.
It is absolutely a time loop, especially given the fact that we have to go to the movies to see certain trailers, which is why I was so bummed how quickly the Avatar Fire and Ash trailer appeared online, like officially released online.
Yeah. I think they just wanted to get ahead of all the people that would leak it. 'cause
I
you know
mean
that's gonna
that
happen, but-
that and it's not like the Odyssey where that movie comes out in like a year, right?
Yeah, it comes out later this year. So
Yeah,
they do want
so
to get that out to people.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's been a strange year. It's been fun. It's been all kinds of weird. But anyway, go check out episode 648. Check out The Naked Gun. We will have a new Women in Session later this week as well. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast. Definitely looking forward to Ava Victor's next.
I'm so sorry, baby.